Think Less, Seymour podcast, episode 2. Today, we are speaking about meditation and helping you figure out how you can begin to meditate. In episode 1, we spoke about how I began meditation, how it allowed me to become aware of how I was thinking, how I was worrying, how I was inflicting so much pain and damage to myself by the way I was thinking, by the things that I believed about myself. And meditation allowed me to sit, become aware of all of this, and begin to process and uproot the things, the emotions, the past experiences that were at the center of this anxiety and self-hatred. We spoke about how what is important is not my story, but how this same practice of meditation can help you change your life, can help you understand and become aware of the way that you're living and the way that you're thinking and the things that are at the root, at the center of your suffering and your struggles in order to get over things from the past, process things that you've been through, and begin to live a life with more peace, compassion, and joy, and how that change of uprooting your own problems will contribute positively towards improving the state of our world. But in this episode 2, we're going to bring it right back to the beginning, speaking about how you can start meditating, why it's important to stay consistent, and also throw in a little bit about my story in order to help you understand a little bit about what to expect and to see that it is not something that is easy and is something that you have to keep on trying, keep on messing up, and then getting up and trying again in order to allow this seemingly insignificant practice of just sitting and focusing on your breath to transform into something life-changing. So when we first start meditating, there are 2 things that we do. One of them is the practice of meditating, sitting down and developing that ability to concentrate on the breath. More on that in a moment. But the other part is to read, is to listen to people speak about meditation, read what Buddhists have said, what other authors and people who are involved in the world of meditation speak about, see which teachers resonate with you. I can recommend authors such as Eckhart Tolle or Thich Nhat Hanh, who will really help you begin to meditate. So as you listen to this podcast and begin practicing meditation, you should also read books, read what other people have said, as that may definitely resonate with you and help you better understand what I speak about in this podcast. But to bring it back to the point, today we're going to help you with how to begin. And what I see to be the most effective way to begin meditating is to begin with this mindfulness of breath, this focused attention on the breath. And what this involves is you taking some time out of your day. It only has to be a few minutes, 5-10 minutes. You take this time out of your day to sit alone with your own thoughts and then begin to practice placing your complete focus and attention on the breath. What you do is you sit, maintain a comfortable, upright posture. The posture is not the most important thing, but you just want to make sure that you're comfortable, relaxed, and are sat somewhere where you're not going to be distracted. That is the first step. Realizing that you want to start meditating and being willing to consistently practice it. Once you have that will, then we can begin. We can sit in a nice upright position and we can begin to become aware of the feeling of the breath as it rises and falls. How does the breath feel as it enters, comes in and out of your nose? Can you feel your chest rising and falling? Can you feel the sensation of the air as it passes in and out of your nostrils? This is the first practice, and it's important as it brings you out of this cycle of constantly thinking into your body. How does my body feel? How does my breath feel? Many people also get this benefit of this kind of concentrative focus on the body through exercise, maybe lifting weights, feeling your muscles as they contract, you see, and relax and move that weight. We get this connection with our body. In the gym, we speak about mind-muscle connection, but with meditation, we begin to connect ourselves not just to our body. We can do kind of body scan meditations and become aware of how our body feels, but the core practice is to become aware of our breath, that mind-breath connection, that focused attention on the breath. That is the simple practice at the beginning. So what we do is we sit down, begin breathing, and become aware of and have our focus and our attention on the sensation of the breath as it rises and falls, which, like I said, allows us to come out of that cycle of constantly thinking and to develop this concentrative silence where we stop thinking as we are completely focused on the breath. While we do this, we can recite certain phrases. We can count the breaths to help us keep with them. We can have 1, 2, 3, 4 as we go in and out. We can also repeat certain phrases such as in, out, deep, slow, calm, ease. We can also listen to guided meditations that provide similar references and words that can just help us bring ourselves back to the breath. As when we first sit down and practice trying to focus on the breath, the first thing that we become aware of is that it's very difficult because we are always thinking, our minds are always flowing. This ability to concentrate on the breath is difficult at first, and it was extremely difficult for me. I was really bad at it. My mind was a mess, always overthinking, worrying, this whirlwind. But with time and with practice, I was able to consistently get to the point where I could just be concentrating and focusing on the breath. And this is how you must begin, developing this mental discipline and this ability to sit down and just be aware of how the breath feels as it flows in and out. And that allows you to develop this concentrative silence. And this can be good as it gives your mind a rest from this cycle of constant thinking, worrying, planning, and all the rest of it. And this is also why exercise is important, like I said, by getting in the gym and just focusing on your lift and moving that weight, you can allow your mind to rest. Other people find this rest by doing more extreme activities, such as riding a motorcycle, where they have to be locked in to what's happening now because of the danger of the situation. But that also feels good because it gives you a respite from that cycle of constantly thinking, planning, and worrying. But you see how by having the anchor of the breath, it doesn't mean that we need to go to a gym or get on our motorbike, but by being able to develop this concentration and this focus on the breath. If we're worrying about something or getting overwhelmed, we can practice sitting, breathing, and bringing our attention to the breath, to the body, to the now. And that can be calming and can allow, like I said, our minds to have rest, where they're just silent, just focused on the breath as it rises and falls. And as we practice more, we will focus on the breath, then realize that we've lost our focus, and then we can bring ourselves back to the breath. You see, focus on the breath, develop that concentrative silence, practice extending that period in which we can just be focused on the breath, not thinking about anything else, but just focused on this sensation. And the practice is to extend this period of concentration and to get better at realizing that we've started thinking and are no longer focused on the breath. That is how you can begin to meditate. And I recommend that you do this every day or as often as you can. As all of us, if we look at our phones, I imagine every single one of you listening here will have at least 5 minutes of mindless scrolling, of time on your phone that could be actually put into calming yourself, relaxing yourself, resting your mind, and beginning this practice of meditation. So to begin with, we sit and we breathe. And then we begin to extend that period of time. We begin to get to the point where we can have more focus, more rest, and this allows our minds to become more efficient, allows us to become more calm and less reactive as we have had time when we've rested. But that is not quite the full shebang. Like I said, this is how we begin. This is important. Keep practicing this, and at the same time, also keep reading about meditation. And what you'll then realize is that although this is good, it gives you a respite, it's not quite giving you that ability to fully understand yourself, as you're not really becoming aware of these thoughts. You're just becoming aware that you're thinking, then bringing your focus back to the breath and are resting. But then the question is, how do we go from this concentrative silence to then having this open awareness? And for me, it went a little bit like this. I was sat there, I'd been practicing this meditation for a bit, doing 5 minutes, then 10 minutes, then 15 minutes. And at the beginning, I could only focus on my breath for a couple seconds, but eventually I could do it for 30 seconds, maybe a minute, maybe a few minutes. But I'd also been reading about these people having these profound insights and moments of ecstatic joy and wisdom, and I wasn't having that. I was just sitting in my room breathing and not thinking for a little bit. And one time I was sat there, trying to focus on my breath so much and wanted more time on the breath. And I was just like, you know what? In light of all this stuff that I've read about meditation and what it can offer you, I've just really been breathing. It's been cool. I've had a bit of respite, but I don't really know what the fuck I'm doing. I don't know. And for the first time, I went from having this kind of silence that only came about from focusing and concentrating on my breath to then having this silence, this bang. As I sat there, I was like, I don't know. For the first time, my mind went silent, not by forcing myself to focus on the breath or by being engaged in something else, but just purely because I didn't know what I was doing. I realized that I wasn't quite getting everything that I could out of the meditation. Bang! There was just this innocence. And then when these thoughts started to come up again, I was like, wait a minute, I could almost have this step back because I'd got to that point where I had that silence and then just didn't know what was going on. And then all of a sudden, as these thoughts started to come up again, it was almost like I'd taken a step back and was able to look at, listen to, and understand these thoughts in the same way I may look out of my window now and see these clouds with different shapes and all the rest of it. I had developed this open awareness. But how does this concentrative silence lead to that open awareness? And in order to explain that, we're going to talk about more deeply what's going on. So, two things are going on. Firstly, with this concentration, we're focusing on the breath. We're developing this concentrative silence through forcing our attention to just be on the breath as it rises and falls. And then we start thinking, realize that we're thinking. This is the second bit. And then bring the focus back to the breath. But then how do we get an open awareness? It's very confusing. But the best way to explain it is that what happened with me is that I kind of realized in that moment where I was like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing, what's going on. I kind of, just by having that little, moment of innocence where I was like, I just don't get it. What I saw that was happening was that despite the fact that I was trying to focus on my breath in this meditation, I was trying to keep my attention on the breath, keep this concentrative silence. But despite the fact that I was actively trying to focus on the breath, these thoughts were just popping up anyway. So before I'd kind of go off into the thinking and just kind of be caught in it, not even having really realized that I'd stopped focusing on the breath just because I got caught in the thoughts, feeling like I was doing the thinking. But with this weird realization I had, it was like, wait a minute. I was actively trying to focus on the breath, but despite that, these thoughts were popping up anyway. And you see how amazing that was. It allowed me to generate space because it made me realize that, wait a minute, I'm not actually in control. Whereas before I felt like I was in control, I was having the thoughts. And that's why when I started thinking again, at the beginning, I wouldn't even have noticed that I'd stopped focusing on the breath because I was just getting caught up within this thinking. But now, because I was trying to concentrate so hard and then realize that despite the fact that I was trying to concentrate on my breath, the fact that despite that, these thoughts were popping up anyway, that allowed me to develop this open awareness, realize that, wait a minute, I'm not in control of these thoughts. they're popping up spontaneously despite the fact that I'm trying to focus on the breath. So you see, this is the shift from that first step of just developing that concentration and that respite to them realizing that despite you trying to do this, these thoughts are popping up anyway. And that will allow me to take a step back and just watch these thoughts as they were popping up. So this is how you begin meditating. Firstly, develop the concentration. Develop the ability to sit there and feel the breath as it rises and falls. Use guided meditations. Use certain phrases that you repeat, Use all of this amazing information that's on the internet and be consistent with your practice. But with this consistency and with just playing around with it, and the more time that you do it, eventually you will realize that you know, after you shift from just this kind of concentration, it's good, it gives you the respite, but eventually you'll realize that what's going on when you're focusing on the breath, thinking, bring it back to the breath, is that these thoughts are just spontaneously arising. You're not in control. And with that realization, we can then have this open awareness. And that is what I spoke about when the meditation allowed me to become aware of the way that my mind was thinking, the thoughts that I was having. I could see these thoughts of worries of thinking about what I had to do tomorrow or what I'd done earlier and what I'd said wrong. I could see it all coming up, and I could see these thoughts of worry leading to feelings of anxiety and all the rest of it. And just by having that step back, being able to be aware of how I was thinking, how that was making me feel, how I was judging myself, hurting myself. At the beginning, it was just in that little window when I'd sit down and meditate. Like I said, you begin with the focused attention, use that focused attention to create this opportunity. This opportunity is created by the fact that you are trying to focus on the breath, but that you start thinking anyway. That transition from concentrative silence to these thoughts popping up allows you to realize that you're not in control, generate that open awareness, and then look at and understand and listen to your mind. See all of these thoughts going on, how these thoughts might make you feel anxious, might make you feel scared, might make you worry about something that never ends up happening, you see. And for me, I could see all of this anxiety, and it's difficult. This is a difficult process to sit down and become aware of this. It's hard. So I understand that it takes time and courage, but I promise you, the more times you practice meditating, the better you'll get at just opening up this awareness, allowing the thoughts to flow, becoming aware of how you're thinking and the sorts of feelings that are coming up. And this awareness then, like I said, allowed me to not just look at and watch my mind, but also see how a lot of the time when I'd sit there and meditate, I'd be thinking a feeling would come up, a feeling of fear or hatred, and then I would kind of want to move away from it. I wouldn't want to feel like that. And I could see all these different ways that my mind would try and justify things and move away from it and, think about something else. So by becoming aware of how I was thinking, openly aware, you will begin to understand, as I did, that many of these thoughts lead you to feel anxious or feel certain ways, or many feelings that you have that come up. These thoughts will also prevent you from being able to fully face them. These thoughts will make you move away from them. You see, you become aware of what's going on in your mind. And for me, I became aware that I was worrying, inflicting this feeling of anxiety on myself, hating on myself, judging myself, and hurting myself. And whenever these kind of big feelings that I felt like were at the center of it all were coming up, I was just thinking myself away from them. You see, I was running away and damaging myself at the same time. And when you look at your mind and become aware of how you're thinking, allow these feelings to come up, because you've now gone from just this focused attention, thinking happens and move away from it, to now looking at it, you can begin to understand yourself, understand how you're thinking, understand how you're feeling, and begin to practice listening to yourself, looking at these thoughts that are going on, and practice sitting there and just letting these feelings come up. Something may have happened to you in the day and you may be hurt. Normally, I would have sat there, something would have hurt me, I would have thought about it, the kind of feeling would have come up, I would have started thinking about it again and just gone through this cycle of, the feeling comes up, I think about it, I justify it. But when I became aware of that by focusing on the breath, opening this awareness. And now when I just sat there in my room, I could see my mind doing this. And therefore, by seeing my mind whirl myself up into this feeling, bring this feeling up, and then move away from this feeling so I couldn't process it, just by seeing that, I could then naturally move towards and let this feeling out and process it, you see. And that is the practice of meditation and how you will begin meditating. Like I said, we first develop this ability to focus on and concentrate on the breath. Then we open up our awareness in order to watch our minds, see how they're operating, see how this kind of river of thoughts and feelings is flowing to allow us to see how we run away from thoughts and then get to the middle of them. And also see how a lot of these thoughts aren't helpful. I'm worrying about something that's going to happen tomorrow. And because in my meditation I was aware of that thinking, the next day it doesn't happen. I can be like, oh, I was thinking all of this, but it was futile. So what the meditation allows you to do is to see what feelings you're running away from. Watch your mind run away from them. Watch your mind have all these thoughts that are useless. And then that allows you to naturally change just by seeing what's going on, having this mindfulness, this understanding, this ability to be openly aware of how you're thinking and feeling. Things will start to change. And that is how we can begin to meditate. Read about meditation, because all that understanding will also help you kind of understand what's going on when you do open that awareness and look at it. Read about meditation, develop concentration, keep doing that. It will take a long time. It took me months before I got to the point where I could go from just concentrating to then being openly aware. But this concentration is still good. It still allows you to rest, but work towards extending that concentration and then eventually being able to open up and shift that awareness to watching your mind, seeing what you're thinking. And then for me, the next stage after that was to then go from just doing that when I was sat there, letting certain feelings and being aware of what my mind was doing while I was sat there in that little window, was beginning to then extend that open awareness. And eventually I practiced meditating with my eyes open, which meant I could then bring this awareness into my daily life. And then I could do the same thing, but I was able to understand so much more about myself now as I was bringing it into my daily life. For example, that same awareness ability to see what my mind was doing, see it run away from feelings, see it make me anxious, watch it, understand it. I could now do it in a social situation, for example, and I really struggled with social anxiety. So before I brought this awareness out, what would happen is I might say something or stutter or whatever when speaking to someone, and then I would think that this person was judging me, and that would cause me to feel anxious and hurt. But now, because I'd practiced this open eye meditation and all of a sudden had this kind of awareness of what my mind was doing, as opposed to kind of being caught in it and feeling like I was in control, because I realized that these thoughts were just happening and I could be aware of them. Then, next time it happened, what I saw was that I would say something, I would stutter, and then what was happening was that this person wasn't judging me. Before, I thought that this person was thinking all these things about me. But with this awareness, this open awareness, I saw that what was actually happening was that I was judging myself. I was thinking these things about myself and projecting it onto them. Meditation allows us to understand and see what our minds are doing, and therefore see how our minds are causing us to be hurt and anxious, you see. And then with that awareness, I could see it was me judging myself and projecting it onto them, and that really this anxiety was rooted in my own self-hatred. And you see, that allowed me to go all the way down to these feelings of self-hatred and inadequacy. And therefore, when I may have gone home that evening and meditated, I could then bring those feelings up, process it, get over these feelings that were at the center of my anxiety, developing that concentration. Then that open awareness through meditation allows you to watch, understand yourself and your mind, and then get to these feelings that are at the center of certain actions. And also, as I became aware of all this thinking in my daily life, I'd realize there'd be times when I was just sat at a nice spot. But instead of just enjoying that spot, I was aware that I was just thinking about all these things. Many of them never even happened. Many of them were things I couldn't even do anything about in that moment. So there was this combination of processing things I'd been through, bringing feelings up of, oh, When I sat there, saw that the anxiety was rooted in this hatred, I could then bring up that feeling and see I hated myself maybe because I was bullied or whatever. You see, bring that all up and process it. And at the same time, I could see there were periods when I was just sat there. And by being aware of all this thinking that was going on, I could, because I was kind of, taking a step back. I wasn't caught in it. I was aware of it. I could just see that it was also useless. And you see how that awareness, that open awareness of how we're thinking, how we're treating ourselves and what's going on allows there to be change. I could process things, figure out what feelings were at the center of the certain thought patterns and feelings of anxiety that I had, and also see a lot of this thinking that I was doing was useless. The thinking that I was doing when I was sitting there thinking about my degree and figuring it all out was obviously useful. But when I just sat and was relaxing, having my lunch, I didn't need to be thinking about it anymore. But now I could see that and there could be change. So this is what you can begin to do. You must begin to start with this simple practice of just sitting and focusing on your breath. Do it every day. Get better at having that concentration. And then from the transition from that concentration of, that concentrative silence to then you thinking again, then practice and see if you can realize that you're not in control. See if you can open that awareness and just watch these thoughts going on as if you've taken a step back, and then see how much that can help you and how much understanding you can develop, how much more you can understand yourself, how many things you can process, how many times you can see your mind, in that meditation, how many times you can see your mind run away from something, run away from a feeling, and then practice contacting that feeling, as you've seen your mind run away, and then you're like, this is the feeling. You see, meditation allows us to understand ourselves, understand how we think and feel, and it begins with something very simple. So I invite you to begin practicing, to continue reading, and to just get to this point through the concentration, which does give you rest, but to get to this point where you can begin to develop insights into the nature of your own mind, to understand yourself, to process what you've been through. And as you do that, your mind will become clearer. These big feelings that were causing you to feel anxious and these things that you hadn't processed that were causing you to hurt yourself and other people, by just seeing this whole process happening of these big feelings leading to certain thoughts and worries and all the rest of it, just by watching that process, transformation can begin. You deserve to develop this ability to understand yourself, this ability to get to what's, or to get towards and to see the root cause of your problems. And you deserve to begin to change your mind, to start to think less, to have more moments where, as you become aware of the thinking and of these feelings and the activities of your mind, and you've seen it, and you've seen periods where this thinking is useless, because you've seen that, you can now have periods where you might sit at that bench and you're just quiet. You're just looking around at what's going on. And that's very beautiful. So this episode is saying how you can begin to meditate and how that humble practice of just focusing on your breath can eventually get you all the way to processing things you've been through, feeling and releasing feelings, deep feelings that cause you to be anxious or, to think and believe certain things about yourself. And that can then lead all the way to eventually, once you've understood these thoughts, to then sitting somewhere where you don't need to think and just having silence and peace. And that is why you should learn to think less and see more. Thank you very much for listening. I will speak to you in episode 3.